Well, you probably know it when you see it. A sea critter that lines so many of our Carolina beaches, but scientists know so little about them.
Yeah, meteorologist Elisa Raffa shows us the groundbreaking research being done to learn about these little creatures and how they're dealing with our changing coast.
These little guys,
People call them Roombas of the ocean.
are horseshoe crabs.
Really, they'll eat anything in the sediment that they can feasibly get into their mouth. This center right here is actually their mouth.
A dinner they find with one of their 11 eyes.
These are their like two main, what we call compound eyes. It's kind of like regular eyes. The rest of them are what we call photophores.
Photophores line their whole body, but only detect changes in light.
So it's just like if you were like looking up towards the sun or light and you close your eyes and you like run your hand across your eyelids, you can still see the shadow. Another molt.
As you can tell, Alexis Longmire is an expert in all things horseshoe crabs.
These are their book gills right here, so that's how they breathe, and they're called book gills because in the water they flap like pages in a book.
She's a PhD student in marine ecology at the UNC Institute of Marine Sciences. Crab by name, but not by genetics. Horseshoe crabs are actually closer cousins with scorpions and spiders, not crabs nor crustaceans.
We call horseshoe crabs living fossils.
They used to crawl the earth with dinosaurs.
They've been relatively unchanged for 450 million years.
But today we are challenging them like never before.
We know this creature can survive a lot of conditions,
Warming oceans, sea level rise, and land development are renovating their homes.
but we're introducing conditions that this planet hasn't seen, at least not since humans and horseshoe crabs evolved.
We know their environment is changing, but we don't know how it's impacting these little ones.
There's really been no studies or papers published about juvenile horseshoe crab ecology.
So Longmire is breaking barriers by going back to the basics.
It's definitely exciting, but also can be very nerve-wracking because you're the one who has to figure it out.
We don't know how horseshoe crabs move, eat, grow, hide, or survive as babies in their nurseries.
We have to figure that out. We have to figure out what you can attach. We're figuring out how big and how small they can be, right? We're figuring out how many times they molt.
And we need these answers in order to better conserve them. So Longmire and her all-lady crew
Hop in.
load up the boat, hit the gas, and steer full speed ahead into Shackleford Banks in Carteret County to find these answers. Anchor out rear, drop in the gear,
Do you all want to put anything in?
and we splish-splash our way towards the shore.
Yeah, just be careful of stepping around the reefs and stuff.
The team gets to an intertidal zone
It's exposed during low tide, covered during high tide.
where baby horseshoe crabs live after they hatch on the beach.
There's like 3 where Noelle are.
Longmire has 8 research sites that can range from the size of 1 to 4 football fields.
I'll do a near shore zone that's like closer to the beach. We'll do a near reef zone, which is like right up against the reef, and then we'll do a behind the reef zone.
Her team marks down not so friendly neighbors like blue crabs and stingrays.
We would take note of like these bird tracks as well. So birds can also be a potential predator to the juvenile horseshoe crabs.
We're standing in what's considered a protected nursery for horseshoe crabs. You can't see it right now because the tide is coming in, but there's an oyster reef right back there that can help shield the horseshoe crabs from things like wave action and predators. So scientists at UNC are bobbing into the water and raking around to find the horseshoe crabs and see how they're doing.
Juvenile Atlantic horseshoe crabs do bury themselves. And this is just a way to hide from predators.
Their love for burrowing into the sand can make them harder to find and trap.
So to make sure that we get a really good survey of how many horseshoe crabs are here, we have to pull these clam rakes through the sediment to see if we can unearth them.
Sometimes science isn't so fancy.
We use either this tracking or scouting method, which I suppose is just a scientific way of saying you just look for them.
Good old-fashioned eyes are needed since the tiniest ones can slip through the cracks.
You can see how small it is. So here's like my fingernail.
Horseshoe crab babies can be as small as a dime.
Knowing how big they are is a proxy for how old they are.
Adults as large as a tire hubcap.
I've seen even bigger ones than this before. It's also very hard to measure live ones as well. He's moving around.
But bigger horseshoe crabs tell us how cozy and safe their home is.
Maybe there's more resources in protected nurseries that allows them to get bigger faster.
Another sign of healthy growth is these molts
It's kind of like a snake where they have to like shed their skin to get bigger.
that are often left behind on the beach.
So when they're ready to molt, they basically open up right here and it pushes water out and they just crawl straight out the front bigger.
They can molt upwards of 20 times, sometimes just days apart, which makes them extremely difficult to tag and track.
Nobody's like successfully tagged juvenile horseshoe crabs, and tagging juvenile invertebrates that molt a lot is just difficult in general.
So back in the lab, these pioneers are testing everything.
Models of nail polish.
From nail polish to ping pong balls
You can see a little bit of the yellow right there.
and injectable dyes to keep them tagged.
I inject a color dye into their legs, and so when I find them in the field and flip them over, you can see the color. So you see here on the right side for us, there's a red and a yellow tag.
No one has ever used these dyes to track horseshoe crabs before, and as Longmire adds to her color scheme,
It can give us like a better idea of mortality and movement if I can successfully tag them.
knowing how little babies become successful adults is crucial to the fisheries economy.
We call it a trophic cascade. So it's this cascading effect through the food web where if you lose one thing, the rest of the ecosystem suffers.
They live among our favorite sea creatures like sharks, stingrays, and clams. But they also house a secret sauce.
Horseshoe crabs have a compound in their blood called limulus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL for short.
It's used as a biomedical resource, an estimated billion-dollar industry.
LAL is used to test injectable equipment and even vaccines for bacterial contamination.
This compound from horseshoe crabs was even used in the COVID-19 pandemic. So as the changing tides of sea level rise renovate their childhood homes,
It could alter predator access to the nurseries. It could prevent the movement they need to find food and other resources.
we need to understand how to help them create stability going forward.
If nurseries degrade, you don't have juveniles becoming adults. Less adults means less spawning, and then less juveniles, and it becomes a really horrible cycle. And so then you'll see populations decline, especially for fisheries that we rely on very heavily here in North Carolina.
The estuaries they live in are some of the most vulnerable places on our coast, the heart of where land, freshwater, and ocean all meet.
Which means anything that impacts those coastal development on land, damming and freshwater or pollutants in the ocean all converge into estuaries.
So while Longmire is at the helm of figuring out the basics,
Later we'll be able to build off of this with these climate change syndromes to really see how much we need to conserve and how vulnerable these intertidal nurseries are.
it's the first step to nurturing a long future for these little guys. Meteorologist Elisa Rappa, Queen City News.